Awesome. So we are live. Hooray. Bye, Marissa. We'll talk about you lovingly.
Good.
Welcome, everyone. I am so excited to be hosting this fabulous panel that we're calling More Than Paranormal. I am here today with Kait Ballenger, Amanda Bouchet, Jeffe Kennedy, and Maria Vale. Welcome, ladies. I'm so excited to chat with you.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Danielle.
you.
Yes, thanks for having us.
Of course. So before we get started with our chat, I do want to remind everyone who is watching right now that you can head to lovesweetarrow.com to purchase books by our wonderful authors, as well as just about any other book you want. They will find it for you if they don't have it in stock. Also, there is a chat function that you all should see. So when you see me like looking over to the side, that's because I'm looking through the chat just to see what's going on. Marissa is also looking at the chat, and she will take everyone's questions down and send them to me. There will be time at the end for questions to ask our guests. Also, don't forget to head to the Love Sweet Arrow's website to see their wonderful merchandise. They have some really fun t-shirts and other fun goodies, as well as they're still doing their surprise boxes, which are a really fun treat for yourself or a gift if you need to give it. And I said this the last time I was on, but everyone should get really excited because they do have fun surprise boxes for the upcoming holiday season. So get ready for announcements about that. So without further ado, I'm going to make this first one easy. Let's go alphabetically by last name. Introduce yourself. Tell us your latest book release and what you love writing about paranormal romance. So we'll start with Kait.
Okay, so hi, I'm Kait Ballenger. So I write on the darker, sexier side of paranormal romance, shifters. So right now I'm primarily working in my 7-range shifter series, which is about a group of wolf shifters called the Grey Wolves, who are cowboys by day, wolf shifters by night. So they live on a ranch out in the middle of Montana. And this is Wicked Cowboy Wolf, my latest release. And I guess what I love about writing paranormal is that there's just endless possibilities for my imagination to play. Even when I was a child, like that was my favorite thing was getting to use my imagination and like think about all sorts of crazy different scenarios. So I think that's what's really fun about writing paranormal is I get to do that for a living.
Awesome. Okay, Amanda, you're up next.
Yes, thanks. I'm Amanda Bouchet, and I write fantasy romance. I have 2 series. One's kind of a futuristic fantasy, and that's actually, I have it here. Yeah, so far there's 2 books in the series, Night Chaser and Starbreaker. And book 3 is coming. It's a trilogy, but it's not written yet. And this is what I like to call my Robin Hood meets Star Wars mashup. So we've got sort of the underdog rebel band of thieves looking out for the little guy and trying to undermine the tyrannical overseer of the galaxy. So it's a very Star Wars-y type universe, but with Robin Hood themes, lots of epic adventure, and of course, romance. And then my other series is the Kingmaker Chronicles, and it's fantasy romance set in an ancient Greek type world where mythology comes into play, lots of, super fantasy elements like magic and dragons and battles, and it's very epic. I also have that here. All right, I came prepared. And that's the first book in the series, Promise to Fire. And that's fantasy romance with tons of adventure. And so what I love writing about fantasy romance is really, like Kait said, it's the endless possibilities. If I can dream it up, I can write it. And there's so much leeway for epic stories and epic characters and sort of even more over the top situations, because you can really make up just fantastical stuff and bring it to people's living rooms and their everyday lives, and that's really fun.
Awesome. Okay, Jeffe, you're up.
Hi, I'm Jeffe Kennedy. Like Amanda, I write fantasy romance or romantic fantasy. We could parse genres till the sun goes down, but that's partly why we call this More Than Paranormal or Paranormal Plus.
Exactly.
I write a number of different series. I'm a hybrid author, so I do both trad and self-publishing. My most recent traditional release is The Fiery Crown on the big poster up on the wall behind me. That came out in May. That's the second book of the Forgotten Empires. The first book is The Orchid Throne, just pretty and shiny. And then I also write the 12 Kingdoms and the Uncharted Realms books, which is one of those books. Pages of the Mind is one that I got my Rita Award for in Paranormal. So, I mean, there we go. And I just had a couple of releases in that this year because I've taken over self-publishing those. And I'm also a member of Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America. I'm on the board of directors. So I love, fantasy is just where I live. I grew up reading fantasy. And so basically, I just love everything that's epic fantasy plus kissing. That's my ideal Venn diagram overlap.
I love that. That's awesome. I mean, that's what, everything, all of the above, and kissing. Amazing. All right, Maria, your turn.
My name is Maria Vale. I also write shifter romances. My latest one is called Season of the Wolf. This is the fourth in the Legend of All Wolves series. And my books are about shifters who are first and foremost wolves. So rather than being men who are trying to subdue their inner beast, they are, in fact, sort of much more wild with a dedication to pack and land as well as to each other. The reason I love paranormal is because I like the idea. Paranormal originally meant beside normal. So for me, it means you can sit beside normal and look at what normal is doing from an outsider's eyes. So the wolves are always talking about what humans are doing and trying to figure out how to make it make sense for them and translate it. What we do does not make sense for them. They have a human behaviors teacher, which allows me to sort of talk about our concepts of everything from lies to family to anything else. So that's what I love about paranormal.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for introducing yourselves. I'm going to say this, I like having you guys introduce yourselves rather than like someone sit and read like 4 bios. So thank you for doing that. That was awesome. So Jeffe, you kind of brought this up and you did part of my job because I was going to say during this conversation, when I put together the questions that I sent you guys, you probably noticed that I use the word like paranormal and supernatural kind of interchangeably. So for the sake of this conversation, I just wanted to say, we're just talking about maybe magic, maybe super advanced science, who knows what, but paranormal, supernatural, I'm sure someone could explain the definition much better than I am, but that's how we're going forth with this conversation. So I wanted to start off by having you guys talk all about paranormal world building, because I love that in paranormal romance, you can take something totally off the wall and make it make sense, which I think is so cool, but making it make sense is really hard. And, to try to convince your readers of the believability in the world you create. So I want to know how you approach creating that believable supernatural world and what goes into creating like a livable space for your characters. So I think we can just, for right now, to keep it easy, go in the same order, if that works for everyone. Okay, so Kait, well, you're up first.
So on a panel of, paranormal and fantasy writers, I may be the oddball here because I don't typically, when I'm approaching a book, start with the world building. I'm primarily a character writer. I think about the characters and the romance first and then sort of build the world outward from there. And I'm a bit of a pantser, so I kind of don't plan much and I'm just figuring out what the world is as I go. And oftentimes it's a thing of, oh, well, wouldn't it be cool if they could do this, right? And I kind of have to keep track of myself and write down different elements. But I think the key to making, you know, fantastical situations and places feel realistic is sort of inserting realistic parts of yourself. So, like, for example, I do not live on a ranch. I am not a rancher, have never been in my life. I'm not a werewolf rancher for certain. Um, but you know, there's parts of myself that I put into the series. So, like, for example, in Wicked Cowboy Wolf, the heroine has a pet pig named Tucker, and my mother actually owns a pig named Tucker. So Tucker is a real pig. So there's real parts of myself in these, you know, worlds and stories that I'm adding in. And I think that gives it that element of, you know, sort of magic in a way, adding in that realism that makes it all the more detailed.
Yeah. Great. Okay, Amanda, you're next.
Well, I think Kait started out by saying she might have been the oddball here, but her answer is very much the same as my answer. I don't actually think that it's your world that needs to be believable. I think it's your characters that need to be believable. So if your characters are relatable, you can relate to their hopes and their desires and their wishes and their failures and their successes, as long as, and also I put parts of myself in that too, but just in terms of, in general, what we can relate to as women, as people, as mothers, maybe it depends on, as pet owners. I mean, all sorts of things can come into play. And as long as your characters are relatable, it doesn't matter what's happening in your world. You can have fire-breathing dragons, you can have werewolf shifters, you can have spaceships that zoom across the galaxy in a matter of seconds. All of that, the reader can buy into in a second. As long as you have characters that are experiencing things that they themselves as people can experience, then I think that's the part that needs to be believable.
Yeah.
And and the rest is just sort of icing on the cake afterwards. And I also build my world around the characters. Once they're in place, then, you know, the world building that comes into play is to move the plot forward or to move the character development and the relationship developments forward. And as soon as I've established the world and the rules in it, etc., though, then I have to maintain, you know, believability within that. I can't just willy-nilly pull things out of the air and, you know. So it, you know, it kind of layers on top of each other after, once you're rolling, I think, with it, and keeping your world believable once you've established it. But as long as you establish, okay, there are fire-breathing dragons in my world, well, there you go, it's fine. It's a question of consistency afterwards with your world building, and not, you know, throwing in things that are a little, you know, oh, I'll just do this because it's convenient here, because that's too much of an easy way out. But I think it all builds, like Kait, for me, it builds off the characters.
Wonderful. Yeah. I mean, that makes total sense. I mean, I think, especially when there is a fire-breathing dragon, and then how your character reacts, you know, makes all the difference. So yeah. Great. Okay, Jeffe, your turn.
I suspect we're all going to say that we are character-driven writers first and foremost.
Yeah.
And I'm also a complete and total pantser. I start with the characters first and write around in their heads and figure out what the world is. So I'm a very intuitive writer that way. But I'm also trained as a biologist from way back. And so my method of filling in the world is I observe things and then I fill in how the ecology is going to work and how the ecology and magic system of the world influences the politics and the social structure and that sort of thing. Over time, now that I'm into multiple series at this point, it's important to me to differentiate the worlds by having very distinctive magic systems between them. And so I've gotten a lot more methodical about that, saying, okay, well, for this world, the magic system's going to be based on this kind of thing, and this is how old it is. And so therefore, like I just finished writing a book in a new world where I decided that magic is the power and this of the system. And so everything in this world depends on whether or not you have magic, and all the conveniences are magic.
Right.
And so that's really different than having like a modern world like maybe Maria and Kate have, where magic is adjacent or new to it.
Mhm.
So those are just the things I think about as I'm trying to build out the world.
Yeah, very important things, I think. Okay, Maria.
Okay, I'm gonna break rank here, because I started when I wrote The Last Wolf, which is around here somewhere. I had thought of it as a standalone, and I had originally imagined that there was this. I wanted to explore this idea of being alien and being more wild within a civilized world. So I started out with the idea of having. I thought you can't have a shifter who's only a wolf out of necessity for a few hours every month. I mean, because then you can just hang out in the basement with your meat freezer, and you can live within the world of humanity quite conveniently. So I made it actually a little over 3 days long, which then makes it hard to live a fully human life. They then have to have a territory, they then have to have a pack, they have to have a whole structure that supports them. They also are then very vulnerable during those days. We like to think of wolves as being incredibly powerful, but in fact, they are incredibly vulnerable. And so I then created a world from that vulnerability that was extremely conservative, because like any world that is under attack, they tend to be conservative, very suspicious. So the world building sort of built out from this one basic desire. And then I wanted to put different kind of characters within these worlds to see how they reacted to this. So each one has different strengths and different weaknesses as they interact within this world. But no, I did start with the world.
That's awesome. I love it. So I want to move on now and talk a little bit about kind of the different paranormal or magical elements that you guys put in your books. So how did you kind of decide, what made you choose shifters, or what made you choose putting it in space or whatever? And how you decide and you choose kind of the various elements of that to include in your book. So for this next question, let's keep the same order and then I'll switch it up. So let's start with Kate.
So I think the reason that I chose shifters is because I really like the idea of like human-like creatures, right? Because they can be in human form, but exploring like a more animal-like base part of ourselves that we tend to like pretend doesn't exist in normal society. So I think that's why shifters was my choice. I kind of like playing with the idea of humans having darkness, but these shifters are maybe a little bit more in touch with that darkness, or as Maria would say, their wild side, right? So yeah, I think that's primarily why I chose shifters. But ultimately, as far as magical abilities go, you have the traditional like werewolf shifter lore, right? Of the idea that they like can't touch silver, or like or they change under the full moon, or various things. And my shifters are not like that. They shift at will. They don't have to shift under the moon, like the full moon, but it's a part of like a ritual that the pack participates in together. It's not like a forced thing. They have increased strength and healing abilities, and like kind of all these things that I wish humans had, I guess, is part of what I was playing with there. But I think the reason I deviated a little bit from like more traditional werewolf lore is just because, I didn't want to put too many rules on myself. That kind of goes back to that, like, letting my imagination play. And like Amanda said, you have to have that consistency in your world building. So I was like, I don't want to put too many rules. Like,
Yeah.
and so the rules have gotten more complicated and built out as the series has progressed for certain. But at the beginning, they were very, very baseline. So.
Very cool. Thank you. Okay, Amanda.
This is a hard question for me because I never seem to have a good answer, even in my own head, for why I do some things. The Kingmaker Chronicles, with the Greek myth-based world, it was kind of a random choice and not at the same time, because I do have Greek heritage. I'm half Greek, although I was born and raised in the US. And it was something that just played in the back of my mind. And when I was trying to build this fantasy world around my character, I was looking for magic and different things that could go on around her. And I was thinking gods and monsters and creatures, and the Greek myths kind of surfaced again at that point. And I decided to kind of toss them in there and mix it up, but in my own way. So I don't adhere to the mythos as we know it necessarily, because it is a fantasy world of my own creation. So I have these myths in the background, and the gods and the creatures that we might have heard of, as you know, in our own reading or studies, but then I can sort of do what I want with them because it's set in a fantasy world of my own creation. So that was fun. And in terms of the magic, I'm pretty much a pantser like most of the people here. And so I just, a lot of it is made up as I go along. But again, there's that question of consistency that you have to hold on to. So, you know, I make notes and make sure that if somebody is able to do one thing, then they can't do the opposite or whatever.
Right.
And there is a logic to it, but it also kind of builds as the story builds, and different things come to light, or different characters come in from the outside that maybe can do other things that we didn't know about before, which is okay too. But then it's almost like a painting where you have a first layer and you put sort of the background on, and then you paint a new layer and you add the house and the tree and whatever else, and you keep building on your painting until you have the full picture. And that's kind of what happens with the books. And once I have the full picture, then a lot of my work is done during the rewrites and the edits. Also, I go back and I can fill in details once I've sort of established the entire story and worlds and the characters and their abilities and everything. And as for the Night Chaser series, it also kind of got set in space accidentally. I had planned on doing another Greek myth-based world and writing a book in Atlantis. And they were supposed to arrive in Atlantis from a futuristic moment in outer space. And I like the idea of a fish out of water, a very strong heroine, you know, character with a background that's strong and, you know, very defined already. But then, boom, she finds herself in this new situation and has to adapt. And I like that idea. But then it didn't end up evolving in that way at all. And she stayed in outer space in a futuristic fantasy type world. I don't like to call it sci-fi because I don't feel that it's tech heavy enough for that. There's not an alien element to it. It's really fantasy, just set in a futuristic world. So with ties to our own world, which is fun, because in the Kingmaker books, I can't put any ties to our worlds really. And with the Night Chaser books, I can. Like Earth was a way back when that people are still sort of nostalgic about in a way. Yeah. So those are my two worlds. I'm not sure. Did I cover the question?
I think so. Yeah. You got a lot going on. I love it.
Too much, maybe.
All right, Jeffe, what about you?
I think it's interesting how we're all touching on like our personal themes and how we explore the magic systems that let us work on those themes, which I suppose makes perfect sense.
Right.
For me, I'm always interested in power dynamics, and my stories almost always, I was contemplating this, my stories always involve like who has magic and who doesn't,
Mhm.
or the idea of magic being lost to the world and rediscovered, or magic being oppressed by, like a brutal government. I don't know. You guys probably can't figure out why I'm thinking about oppressive governments at this point in our history, but it was on my mind. uh, and I think that that's a way of exploring, um, reflecting on our own world and how things work in our own world, and using, for me, magic is always a metaphor. Um,
Mhm.
Mhm.
like my shapeshifters in my 12 Kingdoms Uncharted Realms books, I pulled those from Celtic mythology and from the idea of mutability, of a shapeshifter who could take any form at will, and how that informs their lives. uh, and in my Forgotten Empires books, it's about magic being apparently crushed out of the world, and then the rebels using it and discovering that the emperor is using it against them too. So it's always this. It always comes back to power, to personal
Mhm.
ability to affect the world for me.
Mhm.
Very great. Yeah, that's
Mhm.
super interesting. Yeah, I don't even have like a little comment. I liked that answer.
Did I go too deep? Maybe I went
No,
too
I
deep there.
liked it.
Power dynamics.
I know. Yeah. Okay, Maria, how about you?
In a way, I feel like I have less magic in my worlds than most. I mean, I think like in A Wolf Apart, at one point they're describing a time when humans were as willing to believe um, that men could turn into wolves
Mhm.
as they were willing to believe that caterpillars could turn into butterflies or eggs could turn into birds. It was part of a continuum of the natural world.
Mhm.
So I don't have that much actual magic. In my mind, it's really just sort of the magic of nature as much as anything, because I do think there is an enormous amount of magic in nature, and that is what I'm trying to get across,
Yeah,
and the sort of miraculousness of
sure.
nature.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think there is magic in the everyday as well as in all of the things that people create. I think that's really cool. Okay, so this next question, I'm going to explain it now. We'll just flip and we'll go backwards. So we'll start
Okay.
with Maria and work our way back around. And I think you all kind of started to talk a little bit about what I'm about to ask, which is what do you think that the supernatural reveals about the world we live in today? So, Maria, take it away.
Again, I think you really can look at um, what humanity is. I think there are so many different ways of tackling topics using the supernatural or using paranormal, because you can talk about, and without banging anybody over the head. I mean, one of the things about the pack is, even though they are very conservative, it talks about how bringing outsiders into the pack makes the pack stronger.
Mhm.
So these, those are themes that I like, and there are themes about weakness. Again, wolves tend to believe that the stronger wolves are the most important in the pack, and yet the omega, the least wolf, always has a very important role to play. So, I tried to emphasize a lot of these other things. Again, you can do that and do it sort of gently, I think. But in a way that gets the idea across. I mean, I love, again, power dynamics. Everybody here talks about power, about women, about, especially women coming into their own in incredibly difficult situations. And I find all of that incredibly interesting, and often handled more, not baldly exactly, but more convincingly in fantasy and in paranormal than I think can necessarily be handled in, say, a contemporary, or can't do it in a rom-com.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you. Okay, Jeffy, you're next.
Yeah, I think what Maria just said is really smart, because I think Maria's very smart anyway. But uh, I think that that's a really good point. That the fantasy, the supernatural, the paranormal lets us change up the rules in order to play with the stories and reveal things about people. Uh, and in a romance focused way, you can do things with romance tropes in fantasy and science fiction and so forth that are difficult to do unless you do like historical, because you can create social rules for like marriage of convenience, which is one of
Mhm.
my favorite tropes. You know, I get to do all kinds of marriage of convenience because I can set up the society to make it have to be. You know, with contemporary, it's harder to pull off a really good marriage of convenience.
Mhm.
uh, but I think, you know, in the end, we're still all telling stories about people and how people interact in the world. And like Maria is saying, with women discovering their own power and being able to do things. Uh, my husband and I were watching the Netflix show Away. Have you guys been watching that, about the mission to Mars?
Mm. Oh, right.
I've heard of it. Yeah, with Hilary Swank, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. And so the first season, we watched the whole first season, and the science fiction purists, you know, and I hear from them from the Southwest side, they don't like it because they said that there's like way too much crying in the show. But my husband and I were talking about it, and we're saying, you know, it's really kind of cool, because what Away shows is that, you know, people are going to people. And I was calling it emotional monkeys in space, you know, because we're still basically emotional monkeys no matter what setting you put us in, you know.
Yeah.
And you put 5 people on this long-term mission in a little tiny space capsule, and then you throw all sorts of stressful things at them, and you're still just showing people peopling.
Right.
And so it's yeah, that's my point.
Awesome. No, I love it too. Okay, Amanda.
Well, Maria and Jeffe just said everything so well that I'm not sure I have all that much to add. It's exactly that. Playing around in a supernatural world just opens up the possibilities to put what's important to you on display in a way that isn't beating someone over the head with in a situation that they are actually too familiar with.
Mhm.
So you can take themes that are really important to you, like a woman coming into her own, a woman taking power and doing something with it that is meaningful to her and to the people around her. Or I guess we're all kind of feminists here in that sense, because we all write strong heroines, and I think our stories mainly revolve around the heroine and her journey. So themes like loyalty and forgiveness and falling in love and opening yourself up to a new situation and to a new horizon and a new life for yourself. So many things. And you can take this all and put it in a completely new world, or even in our own world, but with a world apart in the supernatural, side by side with our own world. And it makes it exciting and new. And I think easier to ingest it seamlessly without even realizing that you're getting, you know, a story about a person, and it could be you. It's not you, because the world is totally different, but it could be you. And it just, I think it can make you feel things. It can make you react. It can make a person change, really. I mean, I know books have made me change, and I've looked at characters and said, I want to be more like this person. Or I've looked at books that have been written and thought, I want to write books like this. So I just think it's a way to open up. Maria and Jeffe already said it wonderfully, but it's just a way to open up people's perspective on themes that are really ever present and all around us, but maybe to just hear them better and in a different way.
Definitely. I 100% agree with that. Kait, your turn.
I have the hard job because I agree with everything that's been said, right? I absolutely agree that it's about, you know, these extremes of human emotions. Maria mentioned, you know, outsiders coming into a pack, that sort of thing, like what that feels like, social rules. And so all of that, I think when we're talking about contemporary fiction, right, it can feel a little bit too close to home or sometimes even heavy-handed if you're trying to talk about these big issues, you know, whether they be social or political that we're dealing with in our lives in contemporary. But when you put it into paranormal, you kind of give it that distance that the fantasy paranormal element causes, and that allows it to feel almost a little bit more safe, I think, to explore and kind of go to those depths. Like, this book isn't out yet, but I'm thinking about the fourth book in the Seven Range Shifter series, Cowboy Wolf Legend, which comes out in July of 2021. And when I was writing that book, the hero of the book is the pack master of the Grey Wolves. So he's kind of like the most powerful wolf among this really large, powerful pack. And I had the thought that he needed an equally powerful female to be beside him, right? He needed to be well matched. But at the same time, what would it be like to be a powerful female in a, you know, primarily patriarchal dominated pack structure that I've created, right? So I got to play with some really heavy feminist themes and like, you know, insert things from my own life of what it's like to be, you know, a more outspoken, outgoing woman in a society that doesn't always value that.
Yeah.
And I think having that paranormal element and creating those like social rules allowed me to do that in a way that was safe and comfortable, but still kind of got at those deeper emotions that we all kind of struggle with, while still giving that element of escapism that paranormal and fantasy readers are really looking for. So I think it's the distance that makes it comfortable.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much for all of those really thoughtful answers. I want to remind all of our viewers that if you have questions for our authors, and there have been a few that came in, and I'm just a reminder because Janelle, who comes to like all of these Love Sweet Arrow chats, so hi Janelle, it's nice to see you.
Janelle.
She took this question that was on my original question sheet, but I kind of like hers better. And that is, she said, I started reading paranormal because I read a lot of fantasy novels as a kid. So I was wondering what each author read as a child or teen. And then I had a question just about some of your favorite paranormal fantasy, supernatural authors. So if you guys want to just combine all of those and go from there. So let's start with Maria.
Okay, as a teen, I did read a fair amount of fantasy. My favorite at the time was Elric of Melniboné, which I think Jeffe knows. We talked about this, by Michael Moorcock. And I have always been terrified of going back and rereading some of these things, because a few things that I've reread, did not actually pan out. I liked them as a kid because I didn't know any better, but there are certain writers who were writing in the 70s. I'm almost 60, so I'm a lot older than most people here. But a lot of the men who were writing science fiction in the 70s do not age well. I am here to tell you, I do not like them anymore. But I read a lot of romance as well. I read a fair amount of, there's a romance genre which I actually miss, which is Gothic romance, which I'm not sure anybody writes anymore. If anybody does, please DM me or somehow get in touch with me and tell me all about it. And what other things? I loved anything with magic in it of any sort. I read all the C.S. Lewis. I read the, yeah. I would, at the time, oh, and I did read, yes, of course. I read all the Poppy Z. Brights, and I read the Anne Rices and everything, all the vampires. I loved, and I did love some of those harder, like the Poppy Z. Bright vampire novels. Those were fantastic.
Yeah. Someone in the chat said Victoria Holt has some Gothic romance.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then a more recent one that I love, and she's actually going to be on my regular chat with two other authors, with Melanie Johnson and Angelina M. Lopez, we're going to interview Diana Biller. She wrote The Widow of Rose House.
Oh, right.
It's got some it's like got Gothic elements. I wouldn't say straightforward Gothic romance, but yeah, so.
Right.
But yeah, thank you. That was great. I mean, I'm writing all of these names down. I'm going to check them out. Jeffe, you are next.
Well, if we're talking formative influences, I'm going to say that Anne McCaffrey was my gateway drug to fantasy. I read Dragon Song from the school library in like 5th grade, and it was just, mind blown. It was like a real young woman who I could relate with, plus dragons. And it was like, I never went back. I was an obsessive reader of Anne McCaffrey. And from her, I branched into authors like Patricia McKillip, Mercedes Lackey, Tanith Lee, Vonda McIntyre. I also read Anne Rice exhaustively. I even from way back, while I did read some male authors, uh, overwhelmingly I was reading the female authors, and I think it was because that sense of exploring emotions and romantic entanglements was always the sweet spot for me. I didn't start reading romance till much later because my mom was one of those who thought that romance was trashy and I shouldn't read it. So I didn't start reading that until I could actually go buy it from the used bookstore stealthily on my own.
Nice. All right, Amanda.
Well, it's funny that someone in the comments mentioned Victoria Holt, because I would say that was one of the main authors that I read as a teenager. So it was Gothic romance and not, particularly steamy. So those were hand-me-downs from my mother who was reading those. And then I started reading them too. And must have read 10 or so at least. And I really enjoyed that. But that was a little later. I think in terms of a little younger teen, I was reading the things that Maria mentioned, the Narnia books, Madeleine L'Engle.
Yeah.
All sorts of books by her. Who was the author of The Flowers in the Attic? I can't think of the name right now.
Alexander.
Was it V.C. Andrews?
Yes, that's it. V.C. Andrews, yeah. And I did like fantasy also. I read the Hobbit, the Lord of the Rings, all the Dragonlance books that spun off the Dungeons and Dragons series. I'm not sure that they would hold up well to a reread either at this point, but I love them as a 13, 14-year-old.
Yeah.
And then I sort of moved into the more romance with Victoria Holt. I loved Daphne du Maurier. Was it du Maurier? With Rebecca, and there was another one that was excellent too, just with a girl thing. Can't remember what now. And then the Victoria Holt and the Gothic romance I just kind of flipped more into the steamy romance right from there when I was more like 16, 17. And I think I read everything by Julie Garwood, all the Scottish historicals. Kilts and daggers, and then sort of fell into historical romance from there, and then paranormal romance and fantasy romance. So it's kind of a succession of things, and I enjoy all of those things still. But I would say I went through periods where I was just kind of a little obsessive about each part, and now it's a little more of a smattering of everything.
All right, Kait.
So I guess this is the part where I get to show off that I'm the baby of the group. Because all of my reads as a child are very recognizable, relatively recent blockbusters. So when I was very small, I wasn't very good at reading. My teachers considered me what at the time was called a non-reader, and I just struggled with it for a very long time until I was about, I want to say 9 or 10, right? And I picked up the Harry Potter series, and at the time I was around the same age as Harry, and the books were just starting to come out then. And I just fell in love with the fantasy of that series. And so I had an aunt who was a really big reader and voracious reader. And so she just started, like, you know, throwing anything she could at me that was also magic and fantasy and sci-fi. And so I had a lot of, you know, big love affairs with, like, you know, Harry Potter, Hunger Games, those bigger YA novels that we all know of. But see, my mother was the opposite of Jeffe. She'd let me read anything so long as I was reading, because I had waited so long to be interested in it. So I was reading Laurel K. Hamilton's Anita Blake series at a very young age, which is an extremely raunchy series. Probably I was way too young to be reading it. But that's part of why I would say that my books are on the darker and sexier side, is because that was what I was reading in my formative years. And then from there, I started branching out as I got into my older teens into, you know, sort of contemporary paranormal. So I would say a big influence was I always loved J.R. Ward's books. I really liked Gina Showalter, that sort of thing. So they're contemporaries of ours now, so that's really cool. But I also grew up reading them, so.
Awesome. Okay. So we are now going to move on to the rapid fire fun question portion of the day. Let's go in alphabetical order by first name this time, just so, and that way we can just kind of keep going around and around. So starting with Amanda, this first one is you just choose one. If you want to explain it, go for it. If not, it's fine. Would you choose dragons or unicorns?
Unicorns. I've always been a horse person.
Okay, so if I can think of the alphabet, Jeffe, you're next.
No, I would feel like I should say unicorns, except that I have demonstrably picked dragons. I've only ever written dragons. I think because writing a good unicorn would be hard, you know, especially for those of us, you know, Kate, just cover your ears. Those of us who grew up in the 70s, you know, like there was so much weird unicorn schlock that I would really have to. I don't know.
I must have missed that, so that's why I got the unicorn.
I want to do a good unicorn someday, but I have done dragons.
Okay, and Kate.
Dragons, for sure.
Nice. And Maria.
Absolutely dragons. You know, you've got to have something that's a little dangerous.
Yeah.
Well, my unicorn could be dangerous.
Well, I guess, but it's like, it's the horn. All I ever think is the narwhal from Elf.
Yeah.
They're not all.
All right. I'm gonna write a unicorn, and you're all gonna love it. I swear.
Okay, what magical realm do you want to visit, Amanda?
Why do I have to go first? No. This is rapid fire. Oh my goodness. Magical realm do I want to visit?
Oh my God.
The Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Let's go to Rivendell.
Oh yeah, I like that. Okay, Jeffe.
Turn.
Nice. All right, Kate.
I'll go to Hogwarts, but lately I'll pretend the author doesn't exist.
Sorry.
Very good plan. All right, Maria.
Oh God. What magical realm? I'm just absolutely drawing a blank because, of course, my first choice would be something like Rivendell as well. I don't, except I don't want to go someplace where there's the possibility of Mordor. I'm so not into that. Amanda, I'm gonna come and hang out with you.
Yay! We'll hang out in Rivendell together.
Exactly.
Okay, if you were a witch or a wizard, what would your animal, familiar, or sidekick be? Okay, let's switch it and we'll start backwards this time. Alphabetical first name, Maria.
Okay. I guess I would have a large black dog.
Nice. All right, Kate.
This is kind of an obvious answer, but I would be a cat. because I can be a little bit aloof when I want to be.
All right, Jeffe.
A jaguar.
Nice. All right, and Amanda.
I'd have a raven for a familiar. Send them flying off to do my spy work.
Yeah. All right, and then my final rapid fire question is, it's almost Halloween. Halloween obviously is gonna look a little different this year, but if you were going to a costume party, what would you dress up as and why? Maria.
I think I would, I remember once seeing a costume like this years and years and years ago in college, but I think I would sew little people and little houses to a shirt, and I would twirl around, because for me 2020 has just been a hurricane. It has been can I say a shite storm.
Yeah.
and so that's what I'm going to be for Halloween. I'm going to be the 2020 shite storm.
I agree. Kait.
So my costume would probably end up being in conjunction with my kids' costumes. So right now, I would probably end up either being some character from The Last Airbender, because my son's really into that at the moment,
Yeah.
or potentially Sally from Nightmare Before Christmas, because he's all about watching Nightmare Before Christmas at when we get to sort of October fall season.
Now, I have a 6-year-old daughter, and she is like deep into Disney princess everything. And so, but I'm like, what am I going to have to be like the evil stepmother, the evil queen? None of them have mothers. What am I going to do? So we'll see. Jeffe, what would you dress up as?
No, I would love to go as Maleficent sometime. If I were going to have to do companion to Disney princess, I would totally do Maleficent.
She's the best one. I love it. And Amanda.
Oh gosh, I've gone last and I don't even have an answer.
See, no more excuses, Amanda.
I know. Well, I do love the Disney princesses and stuff, but since Jeffe already took Maleficent, I think that'd be more fun than the princesses. I think I'll go as Wonder Woman because she's awesome and she kicks butt. So
Yeah. Yeah. Great. This is going to be a fun party wherever it happens. Okay, so let's move on to some audience questions because we are getting towards the end, but I'll tell everyone, we'll go a little bit over. It'll be fine. So Lynn has a question specifically for Amanda, and what is your favorite characteristic about Shade? So for those of us who may not know, can you explain who Shade is and your favorite characteristic about him?
Sure. Okay, Shade is the hero of the Night Chaser series. So he is, well, he's a bit of an enigmatic character to begin with. We're not quite sure where his loyalties and are going to fall. And I don't want to give anything away to people who haven't read it yet. So, so Shade is the main love interest of Tess in Night Chaser. And my favorite quality about Shade is, I think, a sense of humor. He's teasing and fun and has kind of a hot, dirty talking streak to him, but it's like he does it all with a sense of humor and not taking himself too seriously.
Okay.
But he takes other things seriously. So he's a person who you can take, like a character you can take seriously because he has values and, you know, but he keeps things light sometimes, and it helps when the story is heavy.
Yeah. Let's take that question to everyone and talk about one of your heroes, because we talked about our heroines and feminism and everything. So let's talk about heroes, like in one of your favorite heroes you've written and the characteristic you love most in that character. So we had Amanda go. Let's go to Jeffe.
that's a hard one, because it's sort of like picking among your children and
Yeah.
like which
How
one's
about the most recent one?
the most recent one. Um, Actually, I'm going to go back. I'm going
Okay,
to defy you, Danielle,
totally.
and I'm going to talk about among my readers, the hero that I always hear come back over and over again is Harlan. That everybody loves Harlan, and I think Harlan is a popular character because he is kind of a paladin. He is a person of enormous integrity. He makes vows and keeps them. He's a big, bulky mercenary, but he's got that soft, chewy center, and he's a real nurturer. And so, it's so funny when I created Harlan, I really brought him in to be a particular opposite to the woman who becomes the High Queen, and I wanted someone who would be both a match for her and who would be able to deal with her wounds. And then he's just turned out to be like everybody's favorite character. Everybody's always asking about Harlan.
Nice. Okay, Kate.
So if we're going with latest hero, so Rogue from Wicked Cowboy Wolf is, he's definitely a bad boy with a heart of gold. And so I think what I love most about him is, he's almost like an anti-hero a little bit. He's almost slightly villainous at times in the book. And but I think what I love most about him is just that it's covering up that soft, gooey center, because I think deep down he's really like the softest among all of them, and all of the outer stuff is just bravado, and that's what I like most about him.
All right, and Maria.
I have a soft spot in my heart for Elijah Sorensen, who's the hero of A Wolf Apart. He's absolutely disgusting and despicable at the beginning. He's been 30 years off land as a lawyer for the pack. And it's not, you sort of see as the book progresses how he has been poisoned by being away and has lost track of who he is. And he's sort of blustery, but then his utter despair when the woman he's fallen in love with seems to not care for him, and his willingness to do anything, and his loyalty, his utter loyalty to the pack, even though they're forcing him to stay in this situation.
Yeah. Okay, so next audience question is from Carrie, and it is, do you build your worlds before you start the first book in a series, or do they evolve over time? So does anyone want to go first, or do you want me to call on one?
I'll go first. I start out with some parts of it. Nobody here is a plotter, which is interesting to me. And I almost wonder if pantsing is part of being a sort of speculative fiction writer. But I definitely start out with a few details and then build it over time. But as I think Kate has said, you have to keep track then. And keeping track of what is possible and what is not possible in an unreal world is kind of a particular task.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, Jeffe, you had your hand raised as well. So how about you go next?
It definitely builds out as I go, and in some ways I wish that it didn't, because you end up painting yourself into a corner. And we've talked about this, that it seems like every single author who writes some kind of alternate fantasy world like this, there are things that we put in like that first book that are like stupid little details that didn't even have to be there at all. There's no reason for them to be there, but then they, like, 5 books down the road, it's like you can't. It totally limits you, and it's like, why did I put this in there? So I have this fantasy, and I write with Dorinda Jones. We sprint together in the mornings. We were talking about that. Our greatest fantasy is to write a complete series all the way through, and revise them all together before publishing any of them. which is really kind of like the old school way of writing. And,
Right.
and we don't feel like we have that luxury to do that anymore, because you got to get the books out there, you got to pay the mortgage. And but it would be so great to write through that whole thing, because you find out things about the world at the end that it's like, oh, I wish I'd put that in the beginning.
Okay, Amanda.
Sort of the same as what we've already heard. I build as I go along, but you have to keep track. And I don't think I've never been backed into a corner that I wasn't happy with by something that I've written so far. I mean, it could definitely happen, but I haven't had that experience yet personally. And usually just keeping track of where I'm at with the world building and is enough. And then I keep building on that. And now I'm getting into a second part of the Kingmaker books. I'm writing spin-offs now on that. So I will have to be, I mean, the first part was contained in a trilogy, so I didn't really have that issue of maybe getting backed into a corner. But now I've got potentially several more books coming in that world. And I will maybe be confronted with the same problem that Jeffe was just talking about. So yeah, I'm definitely a pantser. I know I always have a first scene in my head, and I know how the book has to end. Mm-hmm. And I might have a scene or two in the middle that I know I need to get from here to there, and then to the next one, and then to the end. Mm-hmm. But all the in-between parts, they just grow organically and evolve. And then each part evolves because I wasn't sure what I was going to do for the next part. So then the part after that, it's sort of like an adjustment to maybe a potential idea I had, but now I still got the idea, but I have to finesse it into something a little different, and which is fine. That's how I like writing. I like it to just evolve as it goes. And then the rewrite is really important for tying it all together and planting little seeds. I love it when I reach the end of a book and I know certain things that have happened afterwards. When I go back and start my reread, I reach a point and I'm like, oh, just 3 words here, and it'll tie into something on page 350, and I love that. So exciting. That's my favorite part of building up a world, actually.
Yeah. All right.
It's sort of like, it's almost like, I'm a circular writer. Like I write this way and then go back to here, and then I move on a bit and then go back to the middle. Like, yeah. It's kind of like that. And it allows me to add things in that I hadn't actually thought of at the time. I only think about them after I've written the next 100 pages, for example.
Yeah, no, that explains a lot, like about kind of your process. I think that's really interesting. All right, Kate.
So yeah, I definitely build outward as a writer, and so I don't have a whole lot of details in the beginning. It seems a theme. We're all pantsters. I typically know, like, okay, who my hero and heroine are going to be, like, you know, who's the potential villain. And then once I get like a few scenes into writing the book, then I have an idea of at least the major turning points, like, you know, the major beats of the book. But all those scenes in between are just coming as I'm writing them. And oftentimes it'll be like, you know, I get to a point where I don't know what's going to happen. And so I have to take a few days and just sort of let it ruminate. And then when I sit back down, it's like, okay, now I know. And it just comes to you.
Yeah, really cool. Okay, so I'm looking through questions again. We have a couple. We have a specific one for Maria, and it says, from your book, this is from Lynn again. Hi, Lynn. Maria, from your books, it seems like you have a strong affinity for the natural world. Do you see the natural world in the way your wolves do?
In a way, I would love to, but I can't, because for them, I frequently portray them as when they move from what is called in skin to being wild. You know, they have different perceptions. Their sense of hearing, their sense of the visual world, everything changes. And in fact, in the most recent book, the hero is upset because he thinks the heroine is having sex with him because he looks like her dead husband. And she says, I don't see that way.
Yeah.
I can't tell you whether John had curly hair or straight hair. I can't tell you that. I can tell you what he smelled like. I can tell you other things about him, what he was like, but that I can't. And so I think it's very often a battle between what is seen, and also we talk a lot about what is said. You know, if we cannot define something, often we don't understand it. And for the wolves, they know that that life takes place in between what is seen and what is said in those big spaces that aren't covered by those things. So I wish I could, but I can't.
All right, thank you. Okay, so someone in the chat called Library Addict took my like final wrap up question, which is what is everyone's current work in progress, or what can we expect from you next? And then if you wouldn't mind telling us where people can easily find you online, like where you like to interact with readers. So who wants to go first? I'm not gonna pick this time. Anybody?
Okay, I'll go.
Go, Amanda, go.
So I mentioned a minute ago that I'm working on the first Kingmaker Chronicles spinoff. So the original trilogy wrapped up with those main characters, but there were several secondary characters that absolutely needed to have their stories told. And I've been wanting to do that for a couple of years now, and I finally have the opportunity. So I'm really excited about that. And I'm starting with, for readers of the Kingmaker Chronicles, I'm starting with the beta team books. So those characters are finally getting their stories, and I'm super excited about that. And also, Night Chaser is a trilogy, and I've written books 1 and 2, and book 3 is next also. So I'll do the first Kingmaker book, and then Dawnmaker, which will conclude the Night Chaser trilogy, and then I'll go back to Kingmaker and the beta team books for the indefinite future. So, very excited about that. And in terms of where you can find me, I'm on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, on BookBub, Goodreads. So if you just look for Amanda Bouchet author Amanda Bouchet, any combination of that, and you're gonna find me.
Awesome. All right, Maria, how about you go next?
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, ambulances.
Yeah.
I live in New York. I'm writing the 5th book of The Legend of All Wolves, which is about Julia and Arthur, again, the Omega and an outsider. So she's somebody who's always been under the thumb of very strong men. And she is now discovering that for various reasons, Arthur cannot be her defender. So she has to become dangerous herself. And this is, a chance for her to do that. In terms of where to find me, I am at mariavale.com. For me, social media is like a cocktail party, and I feel like I'm a deer in the headlights. But if you ever want to ask me anything, my DMs are always open. I'm very good one-on-one. I'm terrible at cocktail parties. So DM me away. I would love it. But I'm everywhere. Everywhere.
That's a really apt description, because it's like, wait, I feel like I'm always at the tail end of a conversation, and I'm like, what's happening? Ooh,
right.
tell me.
I like the one-on-one of DMs. I'm good with that.
Is the DM the virtual version of buying you a drink at the cocktail party, Maria?
DMs are basically going into the bathroom stall. I am crawled up in a ball in the corner.
That's funny. Okay, Kate, how about you?
So right now I am working on Untitled, Seven Rain Shifters book 5. Book 4, Cowboy Wolf Legend, comes out on July 27th of 2021. In the meantime, I also have a short story in that same universe that's releasing with 1001 Dark Nights in December. So that's coming. But I'm working on book 5, which is a character in the series named Blaze, who's kind of like the funny guy of the group. And his heroine's name is Dakota. and it's my first friends to lovers romance. Often I have like enemies to lovers pack members. So this one is definitely different for me. And then I also have a little bit of other projects going on. I'm working on an Arctic Wolf series that has yet to have a release date. So more to come.
Great. And Jeffe.
Well, Library Addict knows the answers to these questions because she listens to my podcast. So
Yeah.
that's one thing is I have 4 times a week, I have a podcast called First Cup of Coffee, where I talk about what I'm working on and just like what it's like to be a writer and whatever crosses my mind. So let's see. I just turned in the third book in The Forgotten Empires. The Promised Queen went to copy edits. So
Great.
that comes out next May. I just finished writing this new book that I reference. That's a whole new world. My working title is Dark Wizard, which a lot of people want me to actually have be the actual title. And I'm like, I can't just call this book Dark Wizard. It's got to have a better title. But we're going to go out on submission with that. And I am writing a story for an anthology that I am doing. That's going to be a midwinter holiday anthology called Under a Winter Sky that I'm doing with Kelly Armstrong, Melissa Marr, and El Penelope. And that story is called The Long Night of the Crystalline Moon. And it's a prequel novella to a new spin-off of 12 Kingdoms and Uncharted Realms. So it's sort of like the next generation series.
Yeah.
And you can find me at jeffekennedy.com and pretty much all the social media you can find me. I'll be there, not necessarily behind the potted palm, but quietly circulating with a glass of champagne.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank all of you and for chatting. This was really fun. I feel like I learned a lot. This was super cool. Of course, I want to thank everyone at home who's been watching, and most importantly, I want to thank Love Sweet Arrow for putting this on and hosting it. Before we sign off, I just wanted to remind everybody, head to lovesweetarrow.com for information about buying all of these wonderful authors' books, as well as any other book you may want. Check out their merchandise. I realized I never said who I was. So I'm Danielle Dresser. I'm the editorial manager for Fresh Fiction. So you can head to Fresh Fiction for reviews and contests and lots of fun stuff. And I hope to see you all again here soon. There's a chat on Monday with a few of Avon historical authors, and then I am back next Wednesday on the 30th with more historical romance authors. So thanks to everyone again, and I hope to see all of you again soon. So we'll talk to you guys
so
soon.
much, Danielle.
Thank you so much.
Of course, it was so fun. All right, bye everyone.
Bye.